Hello listeners, it's been a long while. I feel very guilty about abandoning this project for so long, but it has dwelt on my mind. 2024 was turbulent, but that won't be my excuse for leaving my listeners high and dry. This time I'm recommitting and building better structures around my recordings, like batch recordings, so that over time, even when my 9 to 5 gets overwhelming, I'll still be able to release episodes. With that, let's get into today's discussion. So, first off, intro into the movie we're talking about, Robots 2023. Now, many sci-fi movies today, especially those involving robots, tend to be designed to put fear in the audience's hearts. Something to make them feel like a robot apocalypse is around the corner. Robots 2023, the movie I'll be reviewing here, does away with all of that. The movie is based on a short story by Robert Sheckley. It's just about two morally vague people in a race to catch up with their robot counterparts before falling in love. Sounds heavy, I'll go into this. The main characters here are Charles and Elaine, I'll be mentioning them a lot, who have robot doubles that look exactly like them. In the movie world, which is set in the USA, robot doubles have been banned except in Mexico, where they are even granted citizenship. Towards the movie's end, they even serve as border guards on the US-Mexico border. Charles uses his robot double C2 to flirt with women, and once they fall for him, C2, he comes in, the real Charles, and sleeps with these women. Very crass behavior, but that's Charles' angle. C2 also impersonates Charles at his father's company and interacts with his family. In short, all the heavy lifting in Charles' romantic life, his career, his family life is done by C2 while he just reaps the benefits and plays video games all day. Elaine, on the other hand, is a con who uses her robot double E2 to seduce men, sleep with them, and get gifts, which Elaine keeps. So they have a similar dynamic in relation to their robot doubles. Now things come to a head when they meet and decide to take advantage of each other. Talk about aura for aura, right? Now when they're supposed to have sex, a scheduling mix-up prevents Charles from meeting with E2, which Elaine had pushed wants Charles to sleep with, not herself. So C2 goes instead of Charles and then sleeps with her, falls in love, and attempts to elope. Their robot doubles attempt to elope. The movie's main thrust is that Charles and Elaine must team up to recover their robot doubles before more damage is done to their lives. It's a general feel-good movie in my opinion, and I don't want to spoil the rest of it for you if you haven't seen it already. I'll provide links in the show notes to see it. The first thing we're going to cover here now, AI and human relationships. Now let's talk about the AI characters in this movie and how they interact with humans. Now the AI characters in this movie, C2, E2, and E3, which I will cover more in the body of this podcast, and other robotic helpers generally have a subservient approach in their interaction with humans, which might indicate that they have been programmed that way. At least this is the dynamic in the beginning, till C2 and E2 interact and, in quote, fall in love. We then find the both of them define the instructions of their owners, Charles and Elaine respectively, stealing a car, setting Charles up, and aiming to cross the border to Mexico, which in the movie gives robots rights. This raises the issue of sentience and the theoretical challenge posed by some AI thought leaders and scientists of the possibilities of AI systems developing consciousness and a will of their own. AI companionship with humans is mostly through the lens of C2 and E2, and then E3 and Zach, the engineer who developed the robot doubles for Charles and Elaine in the first place. Now, when Elaine was first introduced to this additional robot double, she's shocked, indicating that she was not aware of the existence of E3, and her consent wasn't obtained for additional clones to be made of her, especially as the robot in question, E3, seems to serve as a romantic/sexual companion for Zach, the engineer. In the world of this movie, creating a robot double is illegal, but even if it were legal, it still raises significant data protection concerns. Developing a robot double will involve processing sensitive personal data, facial image, eyes, and body form in order to create a clone that looks exactly like the original human. The lawful basis for this processing is likely consent, and ideally, consent should only be applied for purposes that the data subject has agreed to. Elaine only agreed to the creation of a single clone of herself. If the data controller or processor wants to use the data for additional purposes, they must obtain additional consent from data subjects. As such, if Zach wanted to create more clones, he should have gotten additional consent from Elaine, although very likely she would have said no. In the real world, we don't have this kind of dilemma playing out, but we have similar scenarios, especially with regards to the use of our personal data to train generative AI models. An example is Grok from X. If you're an X user, Grok already has access to your data, interactions on X for fine-tuning its model and that of other models developed by its parent company XAI, another company that Elon Musk has that recently acquired X. This is because the toggle button to grant access is on by default, which should not be the case. If you use X, you can check this out right now by going to settings, then other settings, go to privacy and safety, and then other that go to Grok and third-party collaborators. You'll find that most likely it's on automatically. Data subjects ideally should have the option to actively opt in, which means that button should be off for you to then turn on by yourself. This is mandated by law in some instances, but weak enforcement generally allows generative AI providers to get away with this. Now, here in Nigeria, Article 18 Sub 1 of the General Application and Implementation Directive GAID 2025, which is issued pursuant to our data protection law, provides that consent will be required when, for instance, sensitive personal data is processed or decision is made based solely on automated processing that produces legal or significant effects on data subjects. It then goes further to state in Article 41 Sub 9 that where data is shared with the third parties, explicit consent must be obtained from data subjects. Schedule 1 of this same instrument I'm referring to also says that where further processing of personal data that involves monitoring their behavior for purpose of systematic matching with ads or content, and you don't get explicit or voluntary consent, it will be considered non-compliance with the principle of specified explicit and legitimate purposes. The EU GDPR, their data protection law, also has similar provisions. It says that pre-ticked boxes shall not constitute consent. So X going ahead to tick that box on your behalf, that's not consent. It also provides in Article 22 1C that explicit consent will be one of the grounds for permitting automated decision making. Summarily, X might be in violation of the Nigerian and European data protection laws, and honestly, they have all the commercial incentive to keep doing this. It's a competitive market, and the more quality data you can access, the more accurate and personalized your model can be. They are not going to change their behavior by themselves, really. It's up to regulators to actively enforce these rules to ensure that these guys live up to the best standards. So next thing, let's consider how AI in the movie integrates with everyday life. Now in the movie robots generally carry out jobs that today we consider low wage, like street cleaning, garbage disposal, cashiers. They're generally treated as disposable, like your everyday appliance. Now there's a scene in the movie where some robots that are engaged in picking up trash cans and emptying them in a garbage truck. One of the robots starts to glitch and then litters the contents of the trash can on the street instead of the truck. The driver of the truck, who is human by the way, just picks up the robots and throws him in the garbage truck, so it's crushed with the rest of the garbage. And yet we see that robots are used to carry out low value jobs and are treated as dispensable, really. It's also the indication of human on the loop / human in the loop supervision by maintaining a human truck driver, unlike what is suggested in the real world that truck driving will soon be fully automated and truck drivers will be out of a job. While we don't yet have humanoid robots carrying out everyday functions in today's world, increasingly more and more of us are interacting with AI agents in accessing service delivery. A lot of organizations deploy increasingly intelligent chatbots that can respond to customer queries and provide solutions. If there's a query that a chatbot isn't satisfactorily responding to, the user will just prefer human interaction. There's usually an option to talk to a human customer care representative. This shares parallels with what we see in the movie robots. AI agents as the first line of action, subject to human intervention when there's a situation or glitch that is best resolved by applying human cognitive abilities. I think this is a dynamic that generally we should not only encourage but also adopt policies that promote. Think of it like a form of protectionism, but unlike economic protectionism that uses tariffs or bans to protect local markets, I'm proposing a form of human protectionism, where we ensure that certain jobs are always done by humans, not because they can't be automated, but because doing so creates economic and social dislocations that cannot be easily remedied. And let me give a local example. Now, a popular food delivery app in Nigeria recently let go of the bulk of their customer support staff, so replacing them with AI and retaining just about 8 persons. Now, sources tell me that the remaining staff must now work 14 hours daily. This creates an ugly dynamic that our labor laws must be amended to curb. Currently, the Nigerian Labour Act 2004 doesn't strictly define the hours of work, leaving those details to mutual agreements, collective bargaining, or a wages board. This is understandable, really, as every employment comes with its own peculiarities, but demanding 14 hours of work from customer service staff against the backdrop of wider AI automation is, to be frank, downright exploitative. AI can easily shift the power balance in favor of employers, as they not only use it to cut costs and lay off workers, but the workers who remain employed may be more susceptible to exploitation because of the feeling of gratitude or fear that their roles will be automated also if they don't meet more rigorous work demands. Another important dynamic I want to touch on is the treatment of robots as disposable. Generally, I think that in treatment of robots there's a spectrum. On one hand, there's the angle where we treat robots or AI systems like they are humans with human motives and expectations because they are built to simulate a lot of human characteristics and emotions. The term for this is anthropomorphism. It's a mouthful, so I will avoid saying it as much as possible. I've explored this in previous episodes discussing the movie Megan and a 2022 paper I wrote talking about sex robots. Links to that will be in the show notes. On the other hand, there's the realm where robots or autonomous agents are treated as subhuman. I'm worried about this word because even the word subhuman implies the presence of humanity in a person, which is not given regard to. So let's not say subhuman, maybe disposable or immaterial. Like a while back, I saw this video on X from an influencer who was kicking or hitting his robot. I won't mention his name because that would unwittingly drive traffic to his insanity. I call it insanity and I'll explain soon. Anyways, people called him out for it and he does another video basically saying that he's entitled to treat his robot anyway he feels like because he bought it. So on one hand, we have people treating autonomous agents like they are human. And on the other hand, we have people treating these agents like they are trash. Both of these are extremes that I think that we need to avoid and instead strive for a balance that is somewhere in the middle. Because the movie Robots focuses on the latter end of the spectrum, I'll focus more on the ills of that spectrum. I even just remembered right now that there's a scene in this movie where a friend of Charles, and even Charles himself, used the eye sockets of C2 to open a bottle of beer or soda, not so sure. You have to see it to believe it. Now, if we allow behavior like what is depicted in the movie or what that influencer did to his robot to be normalized, we end up creating a cycle with real-world negative effects. Let me illustrate. Now, if my laptop, my phone, or any home appliance was acting up and I started hitting it, will that solve the problem? Absolutely not. The point is, hitting inanimate objects for not operating optimally is a reflection of your mental state, which is why I called that influencer insane earlier. Also, we have animal cruelty laws in many parts of the world, not just because we believe that animals should be treated in a humane fashion, but because we understand that permitting rough treatment for animals will not remain restricted to animals. Anyone who is at ease with beating or torturing animals stands a strong chance of doing the same thing to humans, especially vulnerable persons, under the right conditions. So we protect animals not just because we love them, although I'm a cat person myself, but because we have the enlightened self-interest to know that protecting them protects us in the long run. In the same vein, robots deserve humane treatment, not because they have some form of inherent humanity, which they don't, but because enabling bad behavior towards autonomous agents will have ripple effects on humans as well. Anyone who is comfortable with hitting a robot for being slow or malfunctioning will not hesitate to hit another human who is in a weaker position, unable to defend themselves, much like service robots. Next thing, let's consider the ethical considerations. So, what are some of the ethical dilemmas presented in this movie? First off, should humans even be allowed to have robot doubles of themselves? In the movie, it is illegal to have a robot double. I should clarify that robot doubles are different from the service robots featured in the movie, and as I discovered them throughout the course of this episode. Service robots all have the same face, so robots who pick garbage, who act as cashiers, they're all generic, all look the same. But robot doubles all look exactly like the human that they are cloned against. Now, it's illegal in the movie to have a robot double, and on the news in one of the scenes in the movie, a man with a robot double was sentenced to about 20 years in prison. So we get there that it's a very serious offense in that movie world. If people make robot doubles that can stand in for them at the office, family functions, and make them more efficient, in the case of Charles and Elaine, who also use them to scam other people. Now, in a world where people are able to acquire robot doubles, it could be argued that this confers an unfair advantage. But then again, a host of other tech gadgets confer unfair advantages. A paid subscription to ChatGPT or Gemini Advanced confers a productivity advantage on the user over someone who is in a free version. Someone doesn't even use these tools at all. Another argument might be that the use of robot doubles creates the risk of impersonation, where the robot double passes itself off as the human. On the other hand, where there are disclosures that the robot in question is representing the human that it was cloned after, there might be great use cases for this. For example, many people today use Fireflies.ai to record virtual meetings that they cannot physically attend or virtually attend, so they get a summary of what was discussed while they were away. Imagine if having a robot double that could attend physical AGMs on your behalf and raise questions about the company's financial statements that you've informed it to ask based on your reading of the annual report. Maybe the robot reads the report itself. Your robot double attends the AGM on your behalf while you're taking a holiday, or you're attending your child's graduation, or just doing nothing really, just resting. Now, we do not have robot doubles in real life, so this is not yet an immediate concern for policymakers. To achieve a state where robot doubles could carry out any legitimate functions I mentioned, legal personhood would have to be bestowed on them, similar to where we have corporate personality for companies. We'll also have to amend some laws to impose liability on the humans who use these robot agents. So, here in Nigeria now, that would mean that we'll have to amend the meaning of the word agent under the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, which only captures humans currently. But also need to review provisions of Section 675 sub 6, where agent refers to bankers, solicitors, auditors, Section 765, which talks about partners in limited liability partnerships being agents of one another. Another relevant law is the Cybercrimes Act 2015, amended last year, which is also relevant. It is the principal legislation for dealing with people using impersonation to commit fraud. People using impersonation to commit fraud. Section 15.5, for instance, talks about employees of financial institutions using computer systems or networks to commit fraud. Now, take note of this. Section 6.1 of this law talks about people who access a computer system or network without authorization to commit fraud. This ordinarily covers people who steal your banking details to wipe out your funds. There's one place where it talks about a computer system or network being used to do something bad, which is in relation to pornography, its production, distribution, possession. In another place, it talks about using a computer system or network to disseminate material that justifies acts of genocide or crimes against humanity. This provision will be relevant if, let's say, for instance, I were to develop a deep fake of Hitler calling for a reboot of the Holocaust, or, Nigerian example, a deep fake of Abacha calling for the killing of all Ogoni people. That kind of use of AI will be an offense under the Cybercrimes Act as it is. It covers the unauthorized access to a computer system for fraud. You don't have access to that system normally, but you were able to gain access to it for purpose of carrying out fraud. Or you do have authorized access to it and then you're exploiting that access that you have to commit fraud. Or you are just impersonating somebody else to commit fraud. It does not cover the use of a computer system that you have legitimate access to then create a clone of yourself in a situation that can be used to carry out fraud, like what Charles and Elaine were doing. That is a loophole, and honestly, we cannot blame the lawmaker because, like I said, we don't have robot doubles in real life. Cybercrimes Act is a 2015 law. We just need to provide an additional amendment to this law that provides a new provision that provides that use of a computer system that the user has legitimate access to impersonate expressly provided there, not so that, because you might want to go to court to argue, but you have to find loopholes and find creative ways of arguing it out, and you might win, you might not win. But if you have an express provision that captures this, it just makes sure that it effectively curbs this kind of incidents happening in the future. Now the next thing, what are the future prospects? Now this movie is set in the year 2032, which is just 7 years away. Now I had to go back to watch this movie because of this episode. I watched it last year or the year before that, I can't remember. And I noticed something that I hadn't paid much attention to before. Now, take note. The movie opens with a governor of New Mexico, a state in the USA, commissioning the southern border wall in his state. He says that before the wall was built, over 10 million illegal migrants were in the USA, but they were deported, and now the wall will prevent them from coming back. The governor then goes on to say that credit should be given to the Tesla Corporation for developing the robots that now do the work illegal migrants did without robbing and raping. Now, if you listen to this podcast around the time I'm publishing this, you probably understand why this sounds really wild. The current US president has made moves to deport illegal and even legal migrants. And one of his critical allies in doing this is Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla. I can't think of a more dystopian example of life imitating arts, but this is not a political podcast, so I can't really dwell on this. One thing that this scene, however, makes clear to me is that developments in AI are not going to be standalone. As countries around the world try to clamp down on illegal migration or put in place policies that prioritize native-born citizens while experiencing a population decline, AI-based solutions are going to be increasingly offered to fill in the gap. The low-paying jobs that migrants do will still have to be done. Increasing the pay for such jobs to make them attractive to local populations will only increase the cost of living. Governments and businesses that want to maintain market competitiveness without migrant labor will find that automated workforces are the next best bet. In line with this, we are likely to see increased investment in robotics, especially in countries facing severe population decline or those with strict migration policies like China, South Korea, and Japan. But then, remember what I said earlier in this episode, that all because something can be automated doesn't mean that we should do it. And even when we do that, we should not ignore the fact that it is going to create significant social and economic dislocations for humans who might be left without a job. Now, let's bring this to a close. Now, in this episode, we've considered the movie Robots 2023. We've covered themes like AI companionship and its implications for data protection. We compared AI in the movie with real-world AI and what should be considered proper treatment of autonomous beings. Should humans be able to even create robot doubles in the first place? And how our current laws might be deployed to tackle these issues and future prospects. In the next episode, I'll still be considering this movie, but we're considering how the AI characters in the movie learn and adapt to their environment, their autonomy, the risks and challenges associated with advanced AI as depicted in the movie, and an overview of the existing and proposed AI regulations that address these issues. I mentioned some of them in this episode, and we'll cover more in the next episode. With that said, feel free to subscribe, leave a comment, share this episode, and if there's a movie you'd like me to consider, let me know in the comments below. I'll also add links to where you can find the movie and other resources that I relied on for this episode in the show notes. See you in 2 weeks.